The Sony Pictures hack, when North Korea declared war on Hollywood. Imagine walking into work one morning, turning on your computer, and seeing a blood-red skeleton staring back at you from every screen in the building. No emails, no files, no access to anything. Just a message from hackers threatening to release your darkest secrets to the world. This wasn't a nightmare. This was November 24th, 2014, at Sony Pictures Entertainment. And what started as a cybersecurity breach would escalate into an international incident that brought one of Hollywood's biggest studios to its knees, triggered threats of terrorist attacks on American soil, and nearly sparked a war between the United States and North Korea. All because of a comedy about assassinating Kim Jong-un. This is the story of the most devastating cyber attack in entertainment history. A story of digital warfare, corporate espionage, leaked secrets, and how a Seth Rogen movie became ground zero for the most bizarre geopolitical crisis of the 21st century. What you're about to hear sounds like fiction, but every word is documented truth. Before we're done today, you'll discover how hackers infiltrated one of the world's most powerful entertainment companies, stole over 100 terabytes of data, leaked unreleased films, exposed embarrassing emails from top executives, revealed the salaries of every employee, published personal information of thousands of workers, and ultimately forced Sony to cancel the theatrical release of a major motion picture after threatening 9/11-style attacks on movie theaters across America. You'll learn the sophisticated techniques these attackers used to penetrate Sony's network, the devastating psychological warfare tactics they deployed to maximize damage, and the shocking evidence that linked this attack directly to a foreign government. We'll expose the internal security failures that left Sony vulnerable, the celebrity scandals that erupted when private emails went public, and the diplomatic crisis that resulted when the FBI officially blamed North Korea for an act of cyber warfare against American soil. But here's what makes this story truly terrifying. The Sony hack wasn't just about stealing data or causing embarrassment. It was about something far more sinister. It was a demonstration of power, a message to corporations, governments, and individuals worldwide that in the digital age, no one is safe. Your data, your secrets, your entire digital existence can be weaponized against you. And the most disturbing part? The attackers got away with it. So grab your headphones, lock your doors, and prepare yourself for a journey into the dark intersection of entertainment, espionage, and international cyber warfare. This is the untold story of how North Korea hacked Hollywood. Let's rewind to understand how we got here. To understand the Sony Pictures hack, you first need to understand what Sony was working on in 2014 and why it would attract the attention of one of the world's most secretive and paranoid regimes. In early 2013, Sony Pictures Entertainment greenlit a comedy film called The Interview. The premise was simple, absurd, and designed for maximum laughs. Two American journalists, played by Seth Rogen and James Franco, score an interview with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. The CIA then recruits them to assassinate him. It was meant to be a silly buddy comedy, the kind Seth Rogen had made his career on. Harmless entertainment. A joke. But to North Korea, it was anything but funny. The Democratic People's Republic of Korea has always been hypersensitive about its international image. The regime built its entire legitimacy on the godlike status of its ruling family. Kim Il-sung, the founder, Kim Jong-il, his son, and now Kim Jong-un, the grandson who took power in 2011 at just 27 years old. The regime controlled every image, every word, every piece of media about the leadership that circulated within North Korea's borders. The idea of a Western comedy depicting the assassination of their supreme leader, portraying him as a buffoon, and making the entire world laugh at him, this was more than offensive. In their eyes, it was an act of war. In June 2014, Months before the film's scheduled December release, North Korea's state media issued warnings. A spokesman for their foreign ministry called the film an act of war and undisguised sponsoring of terrorism. They demanded that the United States government block the film's release. Of course, the U.S. government had no authority to do that, and Sony had no intention of canceling a film because a foreign dictator found it offensive. After all, Hollywood had made countless movies featuring fictional assassination plots against world leaders. This was protected speech, artistic freedom, the American way. Sony executives dismissed the threats. North Korea was known for its bombastic rhetoric, for threatening nuclear war over perceived slights, for making outrageous demands it could never back up. The studio saw the controversy as free publicity. They even leaned into it, using North Korea's outrage in their marketing campaign. The more Kim Jong-un hated the movie, the more Americans would want to see it. But while Sony's marketing team was having fun with the controversy, North Korea was planning something that would change the entertainment industry forever. Now, here's what most people don't know. The attack on Sony didn't begin in November 2014. It began months earlier, possibly as early as September. Cybersecurity experts who later analyzed the breach discovered that the attackers had been inside Sony's network for weeks, possibly months, before they struck. They were patient, methodical, professional. This wasn't some kids in a basement. This was a sophisticated operation conducted by skilled hackers with significant resources. They mapped Sony's entire network, identified critical systems, located valuable data, and planted backdoors and malware throughout the infrastructure. They moved laterally through the system, escalating their privileges, gaining access to servers they shouldn't have been able to reach. They studied Sony's security measures, learned the patterns of IT administrators, and positioned themselves for maximum impact. And Sony had no idea any of this was happening. Why was Sony so vulnerable? In the investigation that followed, several critical security failures came to light. Despite being a major multinational corporation handling sensitive data for thousands of employees and high-value intellectual property worth billions of dollars, Sony's cybersecurity posture was shockingly weak. They stored passwords in unencrypted files with names like passwords. Yes, you read that right. Actual files on the network labeled passwords, containing login credentials in plain text. Their network wasn't properly segmented, meaning once attackers gained access to one system, they could move freely to others. They hadn't implemented multi-factor authentication on critical systems. Their security monitoring was inadequate to detect the suspicious activity happening right under their noses. And perhaps most damning, they'd been warned. Sony had experienced previous breaches, including a massive attack on their PlayStation network in 2011 that compromised the data of 77 million users. But the lessons from that incident apparently hadn't been applied company-wide. The stage was set. The attackers were inside. They had everything they needed. They were just waiting for the right moment to strike. And that moment was coming. November 24th, 2014, the Monday before Thanksgiving. Sony Pictures employees arrived at their offices in Culver City, California, ready for a short work week before the holiday. They logged into their computers and were greeted by a nightmare. Instead of their normal desktop, every screen in the building displayed the same image, a blood-red skeleton. And beneath the skeleton, a message, hacked by #GOP. GOP didn't stand for the political party. It stood for Guardians of Peace, the name the hackers had chosen for themselves. The message continued, "We've already warned you, and this is just the beginning. We continue until our request be met." Panic spread through the building like wildfire. IT staff rushed to assess the damage. What they found was catastrophic. This wasn't a simple data breach. This was digital scorched earth. The attackers had deployed malware that didn't just steal data, it destroyed systems. They used a particularly nasty type of malware designed to wipe hard drives, making them unrecoverable. Thousands of computers across Sony's global network were bricked. Servers went down. Email systems crashed. The entire corporate infrastructure ground to a halt. Employees were told to turn off their computers and not turn them back on. The company's internet connection was severed to prevent further spread of the malware. For days, one of the world's largest entertainment companies was operating like it was 1985. No email, no digital files. People were writing notes by hand, using personal phones for calls, and faxing documents. Yes, faxing. But the hardware destruction was just the beginning. The real damage was in what the hackers had stolen. Over 100 terabytes of data. To put that in perspective, that's roughly the entire digital collection of the Library of Congress. 5 times over. And the Guardians of Peace began releasing it to the world. First came the movies. Unreleased Sony films suddenly appeared on piracy websites. Fury, starring Brad Pitt. Annie, the big-budget musical remake. Mr. Turner, an art film that hadn't even premiered at festivals yet. Still Alice, starring Julianne Moore. And of course, The Interview itself. These films were leaked in perfect quality months before their scheduled release dates. The financial impact was immediate and devastating. When people can watch a movie for free online, they don't buy tickets. Sony stood to lose hundreds of millions of dollars. But then the hackers escalated. They began releasing internal documents, spreadsheets, business plans, contracts, financial records, and most damaging of all, emails. Thousands upon thousands of private emails from Sony executives, producers, and employees. The contents of those emails would spark scandals that dominated headlines for weeks and permanently damaged careers. Sony Pictures co-chairman Amy Pascal's emails were among those leaked. In them, she and producer Scott Rudin exchanged messages that were, at best, racially insensitive. In one exchange from 2013, before a fundraiser where President Barack Obama would be present, Pascal and Rudin joked about what movies the president might like. Their suggestions? Films with predominantly black casts, like Django Unchained, The Butler, and Think Like a Man. The implication was clear and offensive. When these emails became public, the backlash was immediate and severe. Pascal was forced to publicly apologize. Rudin issued a statement calling his remarks insensitive and irresponsible. But the damage was done. Pascal would eventually step down from her position at Sony, a stunning fall for one of Hollywood's most powerful executives. Other emails revealed brutal Hollywood gossip. Executives are calling actors difficult or unprofessional. Candid assessments of films that turned out to be box office bombs. Financial negotiations show exactly how much various stars were paid. Sensitive information about distribution deals and strategic plans. One email chain revealed that Jennifer Lawrence and Amy Adams had been paid significantly less than their male co-stars in American Hustle, reigniting the conversation about the gender pay gap in Hollywood. Lawrence would later write a powerful essay about wage inequality in the entertainment industry, directly referencing the Sony hack as the moment she discovered she'd been underpaid. The hackers also released salary information for thousands of Sony employees, from executives to administrative assistants. Imagine coming to work and discovering that every single person you work with now knows exactly how much you make. The psychological impact was profound. Employees felt violated. Relationships became strained. People discovered their colleagues were making more money for doing the same job, breeding resentment and distrust. Personal information was exposed too. Social security numbers, home addresses, passport numbers, medical records, background check results. One document revealed which employees had been disciplined for workplace issues and why. Another contained aliases used by celebrities when they wanted to travel or check into hotels anonymously. The hackers released the most private, sensitive information they could find, not because it served any strategic purpose, but simply to maximize the psychological damage and humiliation. This wasn't just corporate espionage. This was digital terrorism. The goal wasn't to steal trade secrets for competitive advantage. The goal was to punish, to inflict pain, to destroy. And the Guardians of Peace weren't done yet. Not by a long shot. On December 8th, the hackers sent emails to several Sony executives. The tone had shifted. The messages were no longer just about embarrassing Sony. They were about the interview. The hackers demanded that Sony cancel the film's release entirely. They warned that if Sony proceeded with the theatrical release, there would be consequences. And they included a chilling threat. Stop immediately showing the movie of terrorism, which can break the regional peace and cause the war. Sony was faced with an impossible decision. Do they stand firm on principles of free speech and artistic expression, or do they take the threat seriously? After all, these hackers had demonstrated sophisticated capabilities. They'd penetrated Sony's defenses, stolen massive amounts of data, and destroyed critical systems. Who's to say they couldn't do worse? The FBI was brought in to investigate. Cybersecurity firms were hired to assess the breach and help Sony rebuild its network. The media was having a field day, reporting on every leaked email, every scandalous revelation, every new twist in the saga. But nothing could have prepared anyone for what came next. On December 16th, 1 week before the interview was scheduled to premiere, the Guardians of Peace released their most terrifying message yet. They threatened violence against movie theaters that showed the film. The message read, "We will clearly show it to you at the very time and places the interview is shown, including the premiere, how bitter fate those who seek fun and terror should be doomed to. Soon all the world will see what an awful movie Sony Pictures Entertainment has made. The world will be full of fear. Remember the 11th of September, 2001. We recommend that you keep yourself distant from the places at that time." A 9/11 reference. A direct threat of terrorist attacks on American movie theaters. On American soil. Against ordinary people who just wanted to watch a comedy. The reaction was immediate. Major theater chains, including Carmike Cinemas, Regal Entertainment, AMC Theaters, and Cinemark, announced they would not screen the interview. They couldn't risk it. Even if the threat wasn't credible, even if the likelihood of an actual attack was minimal, could they take that chance? Could they look the families of potential victims in the eye if something did happen? On December 17th, Sony made the decision. They canceled the theatrical release of the interview. After spending over $40 million producing the film and millions more on marketing, after fighting off North Korea's diplomatic protests, after enduring one of the most damaging corporate breaches in history, Sony Pictures Entertainment surrendered. The hackers had won. But who exactly were the Guardians of Peace? And what proof was there that North Korea was actually behind the attack? The FBI had been investigating since the hack first occurred, and they were building a case. On December 19th, 2 days after Sony canceled the film's release, the FBI released a statement that sent shockwaves through the international community. They officially attributed the attack to North Korea. According to the FBI, their investigation revealed technical evidence linking the attack to North Korean hackers. The malware used in the Sony attack was similar to malware used in previous attacks attributed to North Korea, including a 2013 attack on South Korean banks and media companies. The infrastructure used to launch the attack, including IP addresses and proxy servers, had been linked to known North Korean operators in the past. The FBI also had intelligence about North Korean threats against Sony before the attack occurred, demonstrating foreknowledge and intent. President Barack Obama addressed the attack in a press conference, calling it cyber vandalism and promising a proportional response. He criticized Sony's decision to pull the film, saying, "I wish they had spoken to me first. I would have told them, do not get into a pattern in which you're intimidated by these kinds of criminal attacks." The president's comments sparked a debate. Had Sony done the right thing by prioritizing public safety, or had they set a dangerous precedent by allowing hackers to censor a film? Some praised Sony for taking the threat seriously. Others accused them of cowardice, of letting terrorists win, of betraying the principles of free expression. But beyond the political debate, cybersecurity experts were analyzing the technical evidence, and they discovered something fascinating and disturbing about how the North Koreans likely pulled off this attack. North Korea doesn't have widespread internet access for its citizens. The regime tightly controls information, and only a small elite have any internet connectivity at all. So how does North Korea conduct sophisticated cyber operations? Through a unit of the military intelligence agency known as the Reconnaissance General Bureau, specifically an elite hacking unit called Bureau 121. Bureau 121 is estimated to have over 6,000 members, making it one of the largest state-sponsored hacking organizations in the world. But here's the interesting part. Most of these hackers don't operate from inside North Korea. They're stationed in other countries, primarily China and, to a lesser extent, Russia and Southeast Asian nations. This gives them access to better internet infrastructure and helps obscure the origin of their attacks. These aren't amateur script kiddies. Bureau 121 hackers are trained from a young age, selected based on mathematical and technical aptitude, and given years of education in computer science and hacking techniques. They're essentially military officers whose weapon is code. And they're good at what they do. The malware used in the Sony attack was a custom-designed wiper called Destover. It was sophisticated enough to evade Sony's antivirus systems and designed specifically to cause maximum damage. Once executed, it would systematically destroy data on infected machines, overwriting hard drives with gibberish to make recovery impossible. It spread rapidly through Sony's network, hitting thousands of computers before anyone could stop it. But malware analysis revealed something even more interesting. Hidden in the code were artifacts that provided clues about the attackers. Some of the malware components had Korean language characters in the code comments. The compilation times of the malware binaries, when adjusted for time zones, aligned with working hours in Pyongyang. The command and control servers used in the attack had been registered using infrastructure previously associated with North Korean operations. Perhaps most tellingly, the tactical objectives of the attack aligned perfectly with North Korea's stated goals. This wasn't about stealing credit card numbers or corporate secrets for economic gain. It was about stopping the interview from being released and punishing Sony for making it. When you looked at the timeline of escalation, it was clear. The hackers started by causing chaos and embarrassment, then explicitly demanded the film be canceled, then threatened violence when Sony didn't immediately comply. Every step was calculated to achieve a specific political objective. Not everyone agreed with the FBI's assessment, though. Some cybersecurity researchers argued that the evidence was circumstantial. They pointed out that sophisticated hackers could fake indicators to make an attack appear to come from North Korea. A theory emerged that the attack might have been perpetrated by a disgruntled Sony employee who had insider knowledge of the company's systems and used North Korean-style malware to misdirect blame. The debate raged in the cybersecurity community. How do you prove attribution in cyberspace? Unlike conventional warfare, where you can see troops crossing borders or missiles being launched, cyber attacks happen in the shadows. Attackers use proxies, VPNs, and compromised servers to hide their true location. They employ false flag techniques, deliberately planting evidence that points to other actors. In the murky world of cyber operations, certainty is rare. But the U.S. intelligence community stood firm. Based on classified intelligence that couldn't be publicly disclosed, they maintained with high confidence that North Korea was responsible, and they prepared to respond. On December 22nd, North Korea experienced a massive internet outage. For several hours, the entire country went dark, unable to connect to the outside world. While the U.S. government never officially took credit for this outage, the timing was suspicious. Many interpreted it as America's proportional response that President Obama had promised. A warning shot, a demonstration that the United States could retaliate in kind. In January 2015, the U.S. Treasury Department announced new sanctions against North Korea, specifically targeting entities involved in cyber operations. The measures were largely symbolic, given that North Korea was already under extensive sanctions, but they sent a message: cyber attacks against American companies and citizens would not be tolerated. Meanwhile, Sony was trying to salvage what they could from the disaster. On December 24th, Christmas Eve, they made a surprising announcement. The interview would be released after all, not in major theaters nationwide, but in a limited release at independent theaters that were willing to show it, and simultaneously through online platforms like YouTube, Google Play, and Xbox Video. The film became an unexpected success, driven by curiosity, patriotism, and the desire to defy the hackers. Millions of Americans paid to watch the interview online or sought out the few hundred theaters showing it. In its first 4 days online, it generated over $15 million, making it Sony's highest-grossing online release at that time. Eventually, it would gross over $40 million online and an additional $12 million in its limited theatrical run. People weren't watching because it was a great film. Reviews were mixed, with most critics calling it a mediocre comedy that didn't live up to the hype. They were watching as an act of defiance. The more North Korea tried to suppress it, the more people wanted to see it. The Streisand effect in action. But the damage to Sony was immense and lasting. The company spent millions on remediation, hiring cybersecurity firms to rebuild their network, implementing new security measures, and dealing with legal liability from the data breach. Lawsuits were filed by employees whose personal information had been exposed. Insurance claims were contested. Business relationships were damaged by the leaked emails and the public airing of private negotiations. More than just financial costs, the hack damaged Sony's reputation. The leaked emails revealed unflattering truths about how Hollywood operates, confirming public suspicions about pay disparities, lack of diversity in decision-making, and the sometimes petty nature of entertainment industry politics. Trust within the company eroded. Employees felt betrayed by leadership that had failed to protect their data. Executives felt violated by having their private communications weaponized against them. And beyond Sony, the hack sent shockwaves through corporate America. If a company as large and sophisticated as Sony Pictures could be completely compromised, how safe was anyone? Boardrooms across the country suddenly took cybersecurity seriously. IT budgets increased. Chief information security officers found themselves with more authority and resources. The Sony hack became a case study in business schools and cybersecurity conferences, a cautionary tale of what happens when you underestimate the threat. But perhaps the most disturbing legacy of the Sony hack is what it revealed about the nature of warfare in the 21st century. This wasn't kinetic warfare with bombs and bullets. This was information warfare, fought in the shadows of cyberspace. And the attack demonstrated that a relatively poor, isolated nation like North Korea could strike at the heart of American economic and cultural power without firing a single shot. To truly understand the Sony hack and why it was so devastating, we need to understand the underground economy that makes such attacks possible. Welcome to the dark web, where stolen data is currency and cybercrime is a thriving business. When the Guardians of Peace stole 100 terabytes of data from Sony, They didn't just use it themselves. Some of that data ended up on the dark web, available for purchase by other criminals. Employee social security numbers? Worth $2 to $10 each on dark web marketplaces. Credit card information? $5 to $100 depending on the credit limit and additional verification data included. Personal medical records? Up to $1,000 each because they contain comprehensive information useful for identity theft. The dark web operates on hidden networks like Tor, where users can buy and sell illegal goods and services with relative anonymity. Cryptocurrency transactions make it difficult to trace the flow of money. And the marketplace is shockingly sophisticated. There are vendor ratings, dispute resolution systems, and customer service representatives. It's like Amazon, but for crime. In the aftermath of major data breaches like Sony's, this stolen information floods the market. Identity thieves purchase the data to open fraudulent accounts. Sophisticated criminals compile it into profiles for targeted attacks. Foreign intelligence agencies buy it to gather information on individuals of interest. The breach that embarrasses a corporation today becomes the fuel for crimes committed months or years later. But the dark web economy isn't just about stolen data. It's also where hackers sell their services. Want to hire someone to conduct a DDoS attack against a competitor's website? That'll cost you a few $100s. Need custom malware designed to evade antivirus detection? Several $1,000s will get you started. Looking for zero-day exploits, previously unknown vulnerabilities in popular software? Those can sell for hundreds of thousands or even millions of dollars. This is the ecosystem that enables attacks like the one on Sony. The tools, techniques, and infrastructure are available for purchase. A determined attacker with sufficient funding can assemble the capability to breach almost any target. And that's exactly what North Korea did. Researchers believe North Korea has been building its cyber warfare capabilities for over 2 decades. While the country struggles economically and its conventional military equipment becomes increasingly outdated, cyber operations offer an asymmetric advantage. A relatively small investment in skilled hackers and computer equipment can yield outsized results. Cyber operations are deniable, difficult to attribute, and can be conducted remotely without putting personnel at physical risk. For North Korea, cyber operations serve multiple purposes. They generate revenue through cryptocurrency theft and ransomware attacks. They gather intelligence on foreign governments and organizations. They advance political objectives by attacking critics and opponents. And they serve as a form of asymmetric warfare against vastly more powerful adversaries like the United States and South Korea. The Sony hack demonstrated all of these capabilities. It was espionage, stealing valuable intellectual property and sensitive information. It was sabotage, destroying systems and disrupting business operations. It was psychological warfare, humiliating executives and creating chaos. And it was political, successfully forcing changes to Sony's behavior regarding the interview. So what did we learn from the Sony hack? What lessons should corporations, governments, and individuals take away from this incident? First, cybersecurity is not just an IT issue. It's a business risk that requires executive-level attention. Sony's board of directors learned this the hard way. In the aftermath, they faced shareholder lawsuits alleging that inadequate cybersecurity governance led to the breach. Other companies took note. Today, cybersecurity is a regular topic in boardrooms, and many companies have added cybersecurity experts to their boards of directors. Second, you cannot assume you won't be targeted. Sony likely never imagined they'd be the victim of a nation-state attack. They probably thought their movies and celebrity gossip weren't matters of national security. They were wrong. In today's geopolitical environment, any organization can find itself in the crosshairs. Cultural products, like films, carry soft power that foreign governments care about. Your company may not seem strategically important, but to someone, it might be. Third, security through obscurity doesn't work. Some of Sony's security practices, like storing passwords in poorly protected files, suggested they believed attackers wouldn't find or exploit such obvious vulnerabilities. But sophisticated attackers are thorough. They probe for every weakness. Basic security hygiene, like encryption, access controls, and network segmentation, is not optional. They're essential. Fourth, incident response planning is critical. When the attack hit, Sony's response was chaotic. Systems were shut down, but the malware had already spread. Data was being leaked, but they had no effective communication strategy to control the narrative. Employees were left in the dark about what information had been compromised and what they should do to protect themselves. A well-prepared incident response plan, regularly tested and updated, can make the difference between a manageable crisis and a catastrophe. Fifth, the human element is often the weakest link. How did the attackers initially penetrate Sony's network? While the full details have never been publicly confirmed, many breaches begin with social engineering. A spear phishing email that tricks an employee into clicking a malicious link or downloading infected files. A compromised contractor's credentials used to gain initial access. Security awareness training for all employees is not just good practice, it's a critical defense. Sixth, attribution is hard, but not impossible. The debate about whether North Korea was really responsible highlighted the challenges of attribution in cyberspace. But the combination of technical indicators, intelligence sources, and geopolitical context allowed the U.S. government to make a confident assessment. This has implications for deterrence. If attackers believe they can act with impunity behind the veil of anonymity, they will. Developing capabilities and international norms for attribution is essential to holding actors accountable. Seventh, the response to cyber threats requires international cooperation. North Korea could launch this attack in part because they operate their hacking units from foreign soil and use international infrastructure. Combating cyber threats requires cooperation between governments, law enforcement agencies, and private sector companies across borders. Information sharing, mutual legal assistance, and coordinated responses are essential. Eighth, companies must balance security, privacy, and transparency. In the aftermath of the breach, Sony faced criticism for not being more transparent with employees and customers about what data had been compromised. But they also had legal and ethical obligations to protect privacy where possible. Finding the right balance is difficult but necessary for maintaining trust. Ninth, free speech and security sometimes create difficult tensions. Sony's initial decision to cancel the interview sparked intense debate. Should a company bow to threats, even credible ones, if doing so means allowing censorship? Or is protecting public safety the paramount concern? There are no easy answers. But the incident highlighted that these are decisions companies and societies will increasingly face in a connected world. And finally, 10th, the Sony hack was a watershed moment that changed how we think about cyber threats. Before Sony, many people thought of hacking as a nuisance, something that happened to individuals who didn't protect their passwords, or a form of economic crime where criminals stole credit card numbers. The Sony hack revealed cyber operations as a tool of statecraft, a means by which nations could attack each other's economic, cultural, and political interests. It was a wake-up call. The Sony Pictures hack didn't end when the interview was finally released. Its reverberations continued for years, affecting careers, changing industry practices, and shaping the geopolitical landscape. For the individuals whose emails were leaked, the damage was personal and lasting. Amy Pascal, the Sony Pictures co-chairman whose emails contained the racially insensitive jokes about President Obama, stepped down from her position in February 2015. To be clear, she wasn't fired. and she maintained a relationship with Sony through a production deal. But her reign as one of Hollywood's most powerful executives was over. The leaked emails had made her position untenable. Pascal later reflected in interviews that the experience was devastating, comparing it to having her life burned to the ground. She described the humiliation of having private conversations weaponized, taken out of context, and used to define her character in the public eye. Producer Scott Rudin, whose emails were equally problematic, faced criticism, but his career continued relatively unaffected for several more years. The disparity in consequences sparked conversations about gender and power in Hollywood. Would a male executive have been forced out for similar transgressions, or was Pascal held to a different standard? The incident became part of the larger conversation about gender equity in the entertainment industry. Other Sony employees whose personal information was exposed faced their own challenges. Identity theft is not a momentary crime. It's a long-tail problem. 4 years after the breach, former and current Sony employees reported fraudulent accounts opened in their names, unauthorized credit card charges, and the ongoing nightmare of trying to secure their compromised identities. Sony provided identity protection services, but the violation of privacy and the stress of constantly watching for fraud took a psychological toll. Within the entertainment industry, the hack led to significant changes in how studios handle digital security. Hollywood had always been protective of their content, worried about piracy eating into box office revenues. But they'd focused primarily on preventing leaks of films themselves, using watermarked screeners, and controlling access to rough cuts. The Sony hack revealed that the greatest vulnerability wasn't the films, it was the corporate infrastructure. Studios invested heavily in cybersecurity upgrades. They implemented stricter access controls, segmented their networks to limit lateral movement in case of breach, and deployed more sophisticated monitoring tools to detect intrusions. They established bug bounty programs, paying ethical hackers to find vulnerabilities before malicious actors could exploit them. And they trained employees on cybersecurity awareness, teaching them to recognize phishing attempts and social engineering tactics. The legal fallout from the hack continued for years. Multiple lawsuits were filed by Sony employees whose personal information had been exposed, alleging that Sony had failed to adequately protect their data. Some of these cases were settled, with Sony agreeing to pay damages and provide identity theft protection services. Other cases were dismissed, with courts ruling that without evidence of actual identity theft, the employees couldn't prove harm. Interestingly, Sony also pursued legal action against certain media outlets that published articles based on the leaked emails. They sent cease and desist letters arguing that the emails were stolen property and that publishing their contents amounted to trafficking in stolen goods. Most media organizations rejected this argument, citing First Amendment protections for reporting newsworthy information, even if that information was obtained illegally by a third party. It was a fascinating clash between property rights, privacy, and press freedom. On the geopolitical front, the Sony hack became a case study in cyber warfare and deterrence. The incident was cited in policy discussions about how democracies should respond to cyber attacks from authoritarian regimes. It influenced the development of cyber deterrence strategies and contributed to debates about whether cyber attacks should be treated as acts of war justifying kinetic military responses. The U.S. government's attribution of the attack to North Korea, while initially controversial, became widely accepted as the most credible explanation. Subsequent investigations and reporting corroborated the FBI's assessment. In 2018, the U.S. Department of Justice unsealed an indictment against Park Jin-hyuk, a North Korean operative identified as a key figure in the Sony hack. The indictment detailed his role in the attack and connected him to other North Korean cyber operations, including the WannaCry ransomware attack that caused global disruption in 2017. While Park Jin-hyuk has never been apprehended and likely never will be, as North Korea doesn't extradite its citizens, the indictment served a purpose. It put names and faces to the attack, demonstrating that even state-sponsored hackers are not completely anonymous. It signaled to North Korea that the United States had penetrated their operations and identified their operatives, and it established legal precedent for holding individuals accountable for state-sponsored cybercrimes. North Korea, for its part, has consistently denied any involvement in the Sony hack. Their denials have been characteristically bombastic, with state media calling the allegations slander and offering to conduct a joint investigation with the United States to find the real perpetrators. Needless to say, the U.S. government has not taken them up on that offer. But North Korea's cyber operations have continued and evolved since the Sony hack. In 2016, hackers linked to North Korea stole $81 million from the Bangladesh bank in an audacious heist involving the SWIFT international payment system. In 2017, the WannaCry ransomware attack, attributed to North Korean hackers, infected hundreds of thousands of computers worldwide, causing billions of dollars in damage. In subsequent years, North Korean cyber operations have increasingly focused on cryptocurrency theft, stealing hundreds of millions of dollars from exchanges to fund the regime. These operations demonstrate that North Korea views cyber capabilities as a strategic asset, a way to generate revenue, gather intelligence, and project power far beyond its borders. The Sony hack was an early, brazen example of what they could do, and they've only gotten better at it. For Sony Pictures, the company eventually recovered, but the scars remained. The financial losses from the breach, including remediation costs, legal expenses, and lost revenue from leaked films, were estimated at over $100 million. More difficult to quantify was the reputational damage and the loss of trust among employees, partners, and customers. The company implemented the security upgrades and policy changes recommended by consultants. They settled most of the lawsuits. They moved forward with new films and projects. But the Sony Pictures hack remains a defining moment in the company's history, a cautionary tale told in business schools and cybersecurity conferences around the world. And what about The Interview, the movie that started it all? In the end, it's remembered less for its content and more for the controversy surrounding it. It's a footnote in cinema history, a mediocre comedy that became a symbol of free speech and the dangers of cyber warfare. Seth Rogen and James Franco have joked about it in subsequent interviews, but they've also reflected on the seriousness of the situation. People's lives were disrupted. A company was devastated. And all because of a silly movie about assassinating a dictator. Would they make the same film today, knowing what would happen? Rogen has said he probably wouldn't, not because he thinks the film was wrong, but because the consequences were so severe. It's a sobering acknowledgement that creative expression, while valuable and worth defending, doesn't exist in a vacuum. Actions have consequences, sometimes unforeseeable and disproportionate. We've covered a lot of ground in this story. The hack itself, the leaked data, the international crisis, the geopolitical implications. But before we close, we need to talk about what this all means for you. Because the Sony hack isn't just a story about a corporation or a foreign government. It's a warning about the world we live in now. Every day, you generate data. You send emails. You shop online. You post on social media. You store files in the cloud. You use apps on your phone. Each of these actions creates a digital footprint, a record of your activities, preferences, relationships, and secrets. And all of that data is stored somewhere, on servers owned by companies that have varying levels of competence in protecting it. The Sony hack revealed that even large, sophisticated companies with significant resources can be comprehensively breached. If Sony Pictures can be hacked, So can your bank, your hospital, your employer, your favorite online retailer. Any organization that stores your data is a potential target. And it's not just corporations. Governments at all levels have been breached. The U.S. Office of Personnel Management was hacked in 2015, compromising the personal information of over 22 million federal employees and security clearance applicants. The Equifax breach in 2017 exposed the financial information of 147 million Americans. The list goes on and on. So what can you do to protect yourself? First, practice good cyber hygiene. Use strong, unique passwords for every account. Enable multi-factor authentication wherever it's available. Be skeptical of unsolicited emails, even if they appear to come from someone you know. Keep your software updated to patch security vulnerabilities. Use a password manager to help you manage all those complex passwords. Second, limit the data you share. Every piece of information you provide to a company or post online is a potential vulnerability. Think before you share. Do you really need to provide your social security number for that account? Does that app really need access to your location and contacts? The less data is out there about you, the less can be stolen. Third, monitor your accounts and credit reports for signs of fraud. Catching identity theft early can limit the damage. Many banks and credit card companies offer free monitoring services. Use them. Fourth, have a plan for what to do if your data is compromised. Know how to freeze your credit, how to report identity theft, and how to secure your accounts. Don't wait until you're in crisis mode to figure it out. But individual vigilance, while important, isn't enough. We also need systemic change. Companies need to be held accountable for failing to protect customer data. Regulations like the European Union's GDPR and California's CCPA are steps in the right direction, imposing significant penalties for data breaches and giving individuals more control over their information. We need more of that. We need to invest in cybersecurity education at all levels. It's not enough to have a small number of elite security professionals. Everyone who uses technology needs a basic understanding of cyber threats and how to protect themselves. That means incorporating cybersecurity into school curricula, workplace training, and public awareness campaigns. We need better tools and standards for securing systems. Too much of our digital infrastructure was built with convenience in mind, not security. Retrofitting security into legacy systems is difficult and expensive. As we build the next generation of technology, security needs to be a foundational principle, not an afterthought. And we need international cooperation and norms. Cyber threats don't respect borders. An attacker in one country can target victims anywhere in the world. We need agreements between nations about what constitutes acceptable behavior in cyberspace and mechanisms for holding actors accountable when they cross those lines. This is complicated by the fact that many cyber attacks are conducted or sponsored by governments themselves. But it's a conversation we must have. The Sony hack showed us that cyber warfare is not some distant, theoretical concern. It's happening now, and it affects all of us. A movie studio in California was attacked by a foreign government because of a comedy film. That attack destroyed data, leaked secrets, embarrassed individuals, and nearly sparked an international incident. If that can happen over a Seth Rogen movie, imagine what could happen to critical infrastructure. Power grids, water systems, transportation networks, financial institutions, hospitals. Experts have been warning for years that we're vulnerable to catastrophic cyber attacks that could cause widespread disruption and loss of life. The Sony hack was a warning shot. It demonstrated the capability, intent, and willingness of actors to use cyber weapons to achieve their objectives. We should be grateful that the consequences weren't worse and use this as motivation to prepare for and prevent future attacks. There's one more aspect of the Sony hack that deserves reflection: the psychological dimension. The attackers didn't just steal data, they weaponized it. They used embarrassing emails to humiliate executives. They exposed salary information to create discord among employees. They released personal details to violate privacy and create fear. This was information warfare, and it was brutally effective. In the digital age, information is power. Whoever controls the narrative controls reality. The Sony hackers understood this. They didn't just want to damage Sony's business. They wanted to punish the company, to make an example of them, to send a message to anyone else who might consider producing content critical of North Korea. And they largely succeeded. This tactic, using stolen data to embarrass and manipulate, has become increasingly common. During the 2016 U.S. presidential election, Russian hackers stole emails from the Democratic National Committee and released them through WikiLeaks to influence public opinion. It's the same playbook. Hack, steal, leak, and let the information do the damage. We're all vulnerable to this. Every one of us has said things in private that we wouldn't want made public. We've all sent emails or messages that, taken out of context, could be misunderstood or embarrassing. We've all made mistakes, had bad days, or expressed frustrations that we wouldn't want broadcast to the world. The prospect that all of our private communications could potentially be exposed is chilling. It creates a panopticon effect, where we might start self-censoring even in private, afraid that our words could someday be used against us. This has profound implications for free speech, privacy, and human dignity. If we can't speak freely in private without fear of exposure, we lose something essential. The Sony hack was, in part, an attack on the freedom to communicate privately, the freedom to make mistakes, and the freedom to be imperfect humans without every moment being subject to public judgment. So, as we close this story, remember that the Sony Pictures hack was more than just a sensational news story about leaked celebrity gossip and a controversial movie. It was a watershed moment that exposed vulnerabilities in our digital infrastructure, demonstrated new forms of warfare and coercion, and raised fundamental questions about security, privacy, and freedom in the 21st century. The hackers who breached Sony are still out there. North Korea's cyber capabilities continue to grow, and every day, new threats emerge. Ransomware gangs that encrypt hospital data and demand payment. Sophisticated phishing campaigns that trick people into revealing credentials. State-sponsored espionage operations that steal intellectual property and trade secrets. Disinformation campaigns that manipulate public opinion and undermine democracy. This is the world we live in now. A world where a group of hackers on the other side of the globe can reach into your life, steal your secrets, and use them against you. A world where the line between peace and conflict is blurred, where attacks happen in milliseconds across fiber optic cables rather than over months with troops and tanks. It's a frightening world in some ways, but it's also a world where we have agency. We can choose to educate ourselves, to protect our data, to demand accountability from the institutions we trust with our information. We can advocate for better policies, support cybersecurity initiatives, and refuse to be complacent about digital threats. The Sony Pictures hack was a tragedy for those directly affected, but it was also a lesson for all of us. A lesson about the fragility of digital systems. A lesson about the importance of security. A lesson about the power of information and the dangers when that power is weaponized. Let's not forget that lesson. Let's learn from Sony's mistakes. Let's build a more secure digital future. And let's remember that in an age of cyber warfare, we're all potential targets, but we're also all potential defenders. The story of the Sony hack is far from over. Its legacy continues to shape how we think about cybersecurity, how corporations protect their data, and how nations conduct warfare in the digital age. It's a story that will be studied and debated for years to come, a pivotal moment in the history of cyber conflict. And it all started because of a comedy about assassinating Kim Jong-un. Sometimes truth really is stranger than fiction. So there you have it. The complete, devastating story of how North Korea hacked Hollywood, destroyed one of the world's largest entertainment companies, and got away with it. From the initial breach to the leaked emails, from the canceled movie to the international crisis, this was a cyber attack that changed everything. If this story opened your eyes to the realities of cyber warfare and made you think differently about digital security, do me a favor, share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Because the more people who understand these threats, the better protected we all are. And if you want to dive deeper into stories like this, stories about the dark web, cybersecurity, espionage, and the hidden battles being fought in the digital shadows, make sure you're subscribed with notifications on. We're just getting started, and trust me, there are more jaw-dropping stories coming your way. I'll see you in the next one. Until then, stay safe out there, change your passwords, and remember, in the digital age, paranoia isn't a bug. It's a feature.